Right then, what's the family tree of those beloved off-road monsters we all adore? Who were the ancestors of these magnificent four-wheel drive beasts that can climb mountains and ford rivers like mechanical mountain goats? Well, if we're being properly pedantic about it, the first chaps to crack this nut were a pair of British engineers called Burstall and Hill, back in 1826. When men wore proper hats and knew how to use a spanner, they patented a three-axle steam carriage. Now here's the clever bit. The boiler was mounted separately from the passenger compartment, and the whole contraption had a proper drive shaft sending power to all four wheels. During testing, this mechanical marvel managed a blistering 6 miles per hour, which, let's be honest, is about as fast as a particularly motivated tortoise. But here's the rub. The public was absolutely terrified the steam boiler would explode and turn them into human confetti. So our intrepid inventors sensibly buggered off to build steam locomotives instead. Now, you couldn't exactly call this thing an off-roader. It was more like a Victorian drawing room on wheels, but technically speaking, it had four-wheel drive. So there you have it. Now, I'm sure you've all heard of Ferdinand Porsche. Yes, that Porsche, the German-Czech automotive genius who gave us some of the most beautiful cars ever to grace tarmac. Well, in 1900, this absolute madman created what you might call an off-roader. If your definition of off-roader simply means has four-wheel drive. His creation was the loner Porsche Semper Vivus, which translates from Latin as always living. And here's where it gets properly mental. This was the world's first petrol-electric hybrid, with electric motors mounted directly in each wheel. But then came the Great War, and everything changed. The artillery shells of World War I turned fields, forests, and horse-friendly country lanes into impassable swamps of churned-up mud and misery. Suddenly, the world desperately needed tough, uncompromising machines that could bash through the worst terrain imaginable without breaking down or getting stuck. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is where our story of proper off-road vehicles truly begins. Right, the first proper production car with four-wheel drive, and I'm talking about proper, muddy, get-your-hands-dirty off-road tomfoolery here, was actually an American truck called the Jeffrey Quad. Now, quad sounds rather posh, doesn't it? Well, it wasn't. This was a military workhorse, a proper beast designed to haul artillery pieces through whatever Mother Nature could throw at it. Mud, snow, you name it. Now, the Jeffrey had about as much power as a moderately enthusiastic hamster, just over 20 horsepower. But here's the thing. It had a four-wheel drive system with locking differentials front and rear plus four-wheel steering. And this combination was absolutely brilliant in the muck. It could go places that would make a modern Range Rover driver reach for the recovery truck number. During the First World War, the Americans built over 11,000 of these magnificent contraptions. 11,000. That's more than most supercars manage in their entire production run. And this thing was designed to be shot at. Right, so at the beginning of the 20th century, they had rather different ideas about what a civilian off-roader should look like. Take this French engineer chap called Adolphe Quegres, who, by the way, happened to be the personal chauffeur to Tsar Nicholas II. He decided to stick tracks on cars. Right, so when exactly did we get proper traditional four-wheel drive SUVs that modern petrolheads would actually recognize? Good question. Let's have a proper look, shall we? Now, you could hark back to a few motors from the Four-Wheel Drive Company in Wisconsin, built back in 1908. Trouble is, the clever clogs at FWD quickly cottoned on that four-wheel drive was rather more useful on lorries, so they promptly gave up on passenger cars altogether. The next proper attempt? Well, you'd have to wait nearly 30 years for that. In 1935, an engineering outfit called Marmon Harrington, who made their living flogging four-wheel drive transmissions for trucks and buses, decided to chuck some 4x4 passenger cars into their catalog as well. Now, this was brilliantly straightforward yet thoroughly proper engineering. They'd take a Ford, bend the standard transmission, and bolt in their own Marmon Harrington four-wheel drive system, beefed-up clutch, 4-speed gearbox nicked from a truck, and a wonderfully simple single-speed transfer box. But here's the rub. It cost an absolute fortune. Americans back then hadn't quite worked out why on earth you'd want 4x4 on a civilian motor. Still, these four-wheel drive Fords with the Marmon Harrington treatment. These are the granddaddies of the modern SUV. No question about it. Right. Now, the Wehrmacht had not one, not two, but three different off-roaders in their arsenal: light, medium, and heavy-duty variants. Production kicked off in 1936 and 1937, and every single one of them came with four-wheel drive as standard. What's more, both the light and heavy-duty models had four-wheel steering. We're not talking dozens here, or even hundreds. We're talking thousands. They churned out nearly 15,000 of those Horp medium-duty workhorses alone. However, the Wehrmacht's standard off-roader design turned out to be an absolute disaster. They were eye-wateringly expensive to build, horrendously complicated, and about as reliable as a chocolate teapot. Nevertheless, the Germans had proper 4x4 all-terrain vehicles long before Karl Probst even picked up a pencil to sketch the future Willys. Now, Tokyo Kyogen Industries, or Tokyo Kyogen Kogyo if you prefer, was one of Japan's pioneering automotive companies. One of its key party tricks was a switchable four-wheel drive system, making the Kyogen arguably the first proper Japanese 4x4. The Kyogen Type 95 featured independent front suspension and full four-wheel drive with a rigid front-end engagement system. Between 1936 and 1945, the Japanese built just shy of 5,000 Kyogens. And if anyone needs a cast-iron candidate for the title of the world's first mass-produced off-roader, well, we can't see a single reason why the championship trophy shouldn't go straight to the Type 95. And of course, our beloved Willys Jeep that we all adore. The first proper off-roader built for civilian use is considered to be the Willys Jeep CJ2A, which rolled off the production line in mid-1945. Now then, do write in and tell us if you enjoyed this little selection of ours.